الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I want to take some time to learn from you and hear from you and your experience based on the material that presented so far. As we learned from Dr. Atiq, we want to learn from the rest of you and from him as well, more comments. I want to start with my dear brother Omar, our architect, mashallah, his touches are everywhere, so I'm sure his touch also should be there with the children. And he shared with me a story here, so I wanted him to talk to us a little bit, please.
It's a personal story that happened like when I was maybe 13 or 14 years old. We used to have a teacher, his name is Ahmed. And he used to teach history and geography. And I was not a bad student, but at that day we had an exam, and I opened the book inside the table, and basically I copied the whole exam. And although he was standing very close to me, I dared to open the book and copy it all. We finished the exam and we turned the papers. And of course, at the end, he was like collecting all the papers, and he was leaving. The class was a little bit messy between the two sessions. And then he came back and said, all of a sudden, please sit down, Robert, sit down. And he was this kind of teacher who has like very good, what they call wahra, he's firm, and when he says something, we obey. And he said, well, today some of you, and he did not look at me or point at me at all, he said, some of you maybe did not have enough time to study well, and he had to go through cheating or illegal means to turn his exam. I wish this doesn't happen again. And that's it. And till now, I don't know if he was talking about me or not. But the following session, he came, and I had full grade. But he basically he taught me for like 4 or 5 years after that. And believe me, I was like ready every time we have an exam with this teacher in particular to turn my paper white if I don't know the answer, rather than copying a word. So I think it was a very good impact, and it could have been very much negative had he taught me and punished me and did it a different way, which is usually what most teachers do.
So trust is very important, and respect, you see, that's a key. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, since you talked about a personal story, I will talk about a personal story also. I want to take a look at this from a other side also. You know, we're looking at our children. When you look at the children, you know, think about it. You have to change their diapers. They're crying all the time. You cannot go to movies anymore alone when you have children, because, you know, your time is committed. You spend so many dollars on them to bring them up. Yet we love to have children. There's a gratification. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put an innate contentment in taking care of children. But when you look at it the other way, being a child, and both my parents have passed away, so I know the value of having, you know, life parents. To be able to give back to them. I will share a story with you. First of all, why do we do things? You know, anything we do in life, our motivation is we're going to either get something out of it, whether it be financial or whether it be sukoon, like you said, rida, you know. Yes. Everything that we do in life, even when we do altruistic things without wanting anything in return, we're expecting for sukoon or something to come back. I think the best sukoon and the best gratification you can get if you do something for your mother or your father and they give their prayers from their heart. My experience is, I went to Pakistan, where I'm originally from, about 8-9 years ago when my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And at that time, you know, when I saw her, I was shocked. My mother is a very outgoing person. She was a very social person. She had spent 25 years doing tabligh. All her life she basically taught Islam. And here she was, you know, 160 pounds before I'd seen her last, and now she was 85 pounds and was basically told that she was going to die. and she had cancer. And I was finishing medical school at that time, and I didn't know much. I was financially strained. I had a lot of issues going on. And it was very easy for me to meet my mom over there and say, listen, thank you for everything you've done, and have that time with her, and then let her move on. Because, basically there was no solution to this problem. She had cancer that had advanced. We knew that if we brought her to America, there was a surgeon who could operate and things could possibly get better by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it would have been a big hardship on me. First of all, it was bringing her to States, then, financial, I was going through, finishing my school. But we made that decision that we'll take that chance. To make the long story short, while bringing my mom to States, she had a colostomy. So, we had to make those changes, and, I'd never done that before, even going through medical school. And it was very difficult. And then she came to States and she had the surgery. She went into remission. And she spent the next 5, 6, 7 years of her life really enjoying going out there, going back to Tabligh, and then educating others about Islam. But when I was in the plane with her, and this is the point that I want to get to, she made a prayer for me. And she said, what you've done for me this time, I pray that, all your problems go away, this happens, that happens. And I'll tell you, to this day, it has been about 10 years. And it's a very emotional thing for me when I even think about it. But I can close my eyes and I can see my mom. And that is the most gratifying experience of my life. I've done so many things in life that I've been very successful with thanks to God. But I'll tell you that one prayer that my mom made for me changed my life. And I can relate to it because everything that she said that day, and she prayed for that day, when I came back to States, every single one of them came true. And I think because of that prayer from my mom, my life changed. So everyone who's over here who has their mom alive, and even their dad, not only think about this lecture going what you can offer to your children, but see what you can do for your parents, because that is the best. You said the best investment in the kids. I would say even a bigger investment to love and to care for your mom and your dad and get their prayers and be kind to them, because those prayers will change your life. No doubt about that.
Jazakallah khair. It's a very, very good experience, mashallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive her, inshallah, and put her in the highest place in Jannah, inshallah. And join you with her, inshallah. Okay, any other comments or questions that you may have?
Yeah, a couple of small, Well, as our beloved brother said, he's from Pakistan, people from Pakistan like spices. So I'd like to inject a couple of proverbs that we commonly use to gel and spice up the conversation here. Relating to some of the things that we discussed, one thing that brother was talking about trust. The simple proverb that comes to mind is sometimes, like the American term is that, like, when you have to look the other way to build trust. So that we have learned from our elders, and that's the term I use. The other thing which kind of like very closely related to what the brother was talking about was, I have my personal one-liner, if you may, which I use a lot among friends and whatnot, and sometimes even with kids. And that is, alhamdulillah, on an average, we are blessed. We are blessed community Muslims. If you go in any parking lot, mashallah, you will see a lot of Lexuses and BMWs and Mercedes. So that is Allah's gift to us. And the climax to that one-liner is that what my kid has should reflect my values, not my buying power. And I think that we need to, as parents, really keep focus on, because we live in a very materialistic society where there's a lot of peer pressure. And tying it back to that love, I know Brother Hamid, the focus was shower our kids with love. What I have a little trouble understanding is going into frame of mind of a parent who does not do that, because this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really filled our hearts with. That's a gift from Allah, love for our kids. It is given. So any emotionally stable person, and of course there are a lot of wackos out there, so it's not applicable to them, but any emotionally stable person, it is, the love is a given thing. And hence, a lot of times, we really need to step back and really focus on what we're doing for our kids. Is it really loving is being abused, or do we have real checks and balances? So that's all I would like to share.
Any other comments from everybody? Okay, can we get the slides? Can we get the slides? By the way, I just want to thank Dr. Fahd, mashallah. He's instrumental in bringing this. First time, how this workshop came across. He saw some of the tapes that I have, and I did some work for the Irving Islamic Center and Irving Islamic School, so they put things online. And it wasn't really done professionally or anything. So he saw them and he said, why don't we do this here for everybody? And he started to work on it on his own, mashallah, and he printed all the material that you have, and he made all the organization for this workshop. And so I want to thank him, and may Allah subhanahu reward him, and all of those who helped him, especially Dr. Rashid, may Allah subhanahu reward him as well. And I want to thank you and assure you, inshallah, that hopefully, inshallah, we'll use the material that we have here. So quickly, let's go. Let me turn this on. Where is the on button? Here. Yeah. Okay, back to the. Not sure. No, it's not sure. Okay, we talked about the Quranic tools that we need to have in setting the tarbiyah and in raising our children. And we said the first tool is to have that starting with Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, and the dua. And the second tool is to set the right attitude. That will fix everything else. Where are we getting this from? That's what the Quran does. Set the attitude for us at the beginning of the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah. Set that right, the rest will be set right, as we explained earlier and as we gave the example of Talut and Jalut and the examples there. We also emphasize the rule of love and the rule of hanan, and this is a very important element in the tarbiyah process that the Quran emphasized. And we said Allah here, put the love and the hanan on Yahya. So that is very important. When Allah wants to raise somebody in the best way, Allah showers them with His love and makes the people love them and makes them lovely. That is very important part. The rida, that they are pleased. When somebody is pleased, say, Alhamdulillah, whatever Allah gives me is good. That is something that is very valuable. There's nothing more would be more valuable than a child who says, Alhamdulillah. If Allah says that, I accept it, I take it. There is nothing better for me than that. I remember we were discussing in the morning assembly one of the, how do you translate your ni'mah upon you into something, Allah's belief and the aqidah into action. And one of the children was saying, she said, when I see something that I don't like, I say Alhamdulillah, maybe it's good for me. When it comes from a child like that, it's really very valuable. And that's what we want to have. وَجَعَلْهُ رَبِّي رَضِيًّا. So the word رَضِيًّا here, the one who accepts what Allah puts for him and makes the people have rida with him or with her. That is a very important tarbiyah tool that we talked about. And we also said that just taking things lightly and not putting enough effort in them is not also good. So خُذِ الْكِتَابَ بِقُوَّةٍ. You have to take things seriously and strongly. And we talked about the hanan, وَحَنَانًا مِنْ لَدُنَّا. We talked about بِرُّ الْوَالِدَيْنِ, And we said that we're not really doing enough here in the USA in terms of educating our kids about birrul walidain. And that's something missing. We have to emphasize that and work on that. And let every child memorize the verses that talk in Surah Al-Isra, وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ حُسْنًا. That part of the Surah Al-Isra should be really taught to the kids much better than the way we're doing right now. Also, something that I did not mention, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ جَبَّارًا عَصِيًّا. Somebody who's arrogant and shouting and doing this is not really the best that one can do at this time. So it becomes very important that I bring a child with a personality that is very nice and able to communicate with others as well. We also said the salah here is a very important term that all the prophets emphasize on. That's something else that we added. And we said love, the elements of successful relations between the parent and the child. Number one is the love. Number two is the hanan, or the mercy. And they apply to all human relations. And number three is the trust. We have to trust our children. And we have to bring a mutual trust between us, as we explained earlier. And number three is respect. Respect means you don't humiliate your child under any circumstances. That's you don't shout at them, you don't yell at them. Sometimes you shout, that's natural, but do not humiliate them. Do not, one of the things that I strongly recommend is don't ever disown your child. Like, for example, you're not my child. Ever do that. And I share with you a personal story. Happened to talking to one of my children, and then said, well, at one time you disowned me. I said, no, I never do that. I know myself very well. I never do that. He said, well, you did. I said, no, I didn't. Absolutely positive. I just want to emphasize the point that I will never do that. And if it happened, it might have been a mistake someplace, but I will never do that. So I said, you even sent to me an email. I said, did I? I said, yeah, you sent me an email, and you said that in the email, and I said, luckily, my child, I didn't erase my emails. I'll go back to my emails and find out what was there. So we opened the email, I go back, because that's bothering me, it's something serious. I go to the email, open the email, the first thing, my dear, I don't want to say son or daughter, my dear son. Okay, and then, you see, starting with my dear, how would I disown you if I say my dear son? You see? And then we went through the email. See, all the email is about things I want you to do to become responsible, a good person. And then he said, yeah, I don't know where I got the impression. So, you see, the children will get the impression when you yell at them. They was mad at him, angry at him. That's where he got the impression. So it's very important that we really build that respect. Respect is very important. Don't ever humiliate your child, especially in front of other people. Some children will take it, some children will never take it. They'll yell back at you, they'll shout at you, they'll do things worse than you ever think. And we said that the love is translated into forgiveness, the mercy is translated into peace, child lives in peace, and the trust means husnul dhan, think good of others, and we said the respect means that you praise them. And then we said, after that, the parent goodness, talked about it, that if the parent is good, Allah will reward the parent and will give you a good reward for your children. And we gave the examples of Ishaq and Yaqub and how Allah blessed them. And then we talked about Yusuf alayhi salam and how Allah blessed him even though he wasn't with his father. But as a reward for the salah of the parents, Allah rewarded him and Something else we said, you remember what was a main point here that I wanted to make from the story of Yusuf?
The first 11 years.
The first 11 years, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Yasser. The first 11 years, very instrumental. The father was not there, the mother was not there, but the 11 years that he spent with them was a good investment. They resulted in success of Yusuf alayhi salam, and Allah after that blessed him as a reward for his parents, and his translation of the words that he said to the people in the jail, and how he said to them, you know, وَاتَّبَعْتُ مِلَّةَ آبَائِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ مَا كَانَ لَنَا أَن نُشْرِكَ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. I followed the religion of my grandparents, and we associate no partners with Allah. All of that he learned from his father earlier, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala added to it later. That's very important element. And all what the father did was to say, فَاللَّهُ خَيْرٌ حَافِظًا وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. And then we talked about the importance of hardship, the importance of difficulties, and that's where we ended. And I think it's very important to realize that the Quran somehow condemned people swimming in luxury. And we said it's very important that we look into how Allah, when Allah said to Musa alayhi salam, وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَىٰ عَيْنِي, so that you made under my own supervision, so that I make you. Then we ended up with the last thing we did, last session was, how would Allah raise Musa alayhi salam? If Allah is making him, raising him, how did he do that? And what applied to Musa would apply to all the prophets who came to him. So it's not even Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what Allah is telling Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is how I raised the Prophet. This is how I raised Musa alayhi salam. And that's a very important element for us. So when we look at Musa, as Allah said, وَاصْطَنَعْتُكَ لِنَفْسِي, the term صِنَاعَةٌ or اصْطَنَعْتُكَ comes only in Surah Taha over here. Is مَصَانِعَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَخْلُدُونَ. A few other places where the word مَصَانِع or صِنَاعَة is mentioned, that this is very exclusive term about tarbiyah. The Quranic term of tarbiyah that Allah used here is صِنَاعَةٌ وَاصْطَنَعْتُكَ لِنَفْسِي or وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَىٰ عَيْنِي. Both these terms that we have here, وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَىٰ عَيْنِي, are Allah's terms about tarbiyah and how he raises the prophets. So when we look at it, we see Allah took him from the palace, put him in hardship. That's very important. And we go back to what our dear Dr. Rashid here said to us earlier. Am I correct? Dr. Ashraf. Dr. Ashraf indicated to us how they would send the children to the desert. It's part of the hardship. Part of living in a natural environment where the children are not spoiled. We spoil our children to death. And I told you the story of the person in United Arab Emirates who would, bidding on putting $50,000 just to get number one on a plate, on a car plate. That's an example of how people sometimes swim in luxury, and the luxury makes them blind. So Allah takes him, put him in a harsh environment. Now, you look similarly to Yusuf alayhi salam. Where Yusuf was in the palace. Allah took him out of the palace. Allah took Musa out of the palace. Where did Yusuf go after the palace? Jail. Jail is not a nice place to stay at. But Allah prepared His Prophet by putting him in jail. A very difficult situation. How long did he stay in jail? Several years. Several years. فَلَبِثَ فِي السِّجْنِ بِضْعَ سِنِينَ. As the Quran expressed it, he stayed in jail several years. Several could mean 5 to 7. Stayed a good amount of years in jail. And he learned in jail, and he taught in jail. And actually we see the growth of Yusuf alayhi salam in jail. First he was in a rush. اذْكُرْنِي عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ. He says to one of the slaves, mention my name to your king, and then he'll release me. We hear فَأَنْسَاهُ الشَّيْطَانُ ذِكْرَ رَبِّهِ فَلَبِثَ فِي السِّجْنِ بِضْعَ سِنِينَ. Then he forgot and he stayed in jail several years after that. But later, what happened when the messenger of the king came and asked him to release, and go, you set free. What did he say? Go back to your Lord. He wasn't in a rush. He was in a rush the first time. He learned. He said, go back to your Lord. Ask him what happened to the ladies who accused me. It was that's part of the learning that he was gaining and the experience that he gained. So definitely, the hardship was a major tool in raising the prophets. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ lost his father, lost his mother, very ill, lost his father before he was born, lost his mother before, he was very young when he lost his father. That's what happens with all the prophets that we see. So definitely that's a very important tarbiyah tool. Now the question is, how am I going to do that? How am I going to put my children in this hardship environment? Or how would I avoid that? What would I do? Can you suggest anything? How would I utilize this point practically now? The question is, the concept is there. In order to provide a good tarbiyah, you really have to just put them in an environment of hardship, difficulties. Right? So what would I do? Yes. Tayyib.
One thing like put some games, whatever they like, and what they have interest, look for their interest, and give them some opportunity to do something in that thing, in their interest.
So you're gonna say it again?
Yes. One thing that whatever the game they like, put them in that game, and push them to do their best in that game. The second thing, look for their interest, whatever they have interest. Gives them some opportunity to do in that field.
Very good. So what you're trying to say is let them do something they like, and then they grow in that.
Exactly.
Okay. Very good.
Because then I see that they spend lots of time in that thing.
Okay.
Because they like to do that.
Very good. So we try to do something like that. Any other suggestions that we have? Yes, Dr.
They've done research with kids where they showed that kids who have a car that was bought by their parents get into accidents more commonly and don't take care of the cars as well as kids who have earned the money and bought it. This small story, just 1 minute.
Please.
There was a young man walking, and he was cleaning his shoe with a very, very expensive cloth. There was an older gentleman who saw him and said, What are you doing? You got to be more respectful. This is very expensive. And he said, go away. Don't ask me. Kept walking. The man came up to him and he said, just explain to you what are you doing? You're cleaning your dirty shoe with this very expensive cloth. And he said, what do you know? This shoe, I worked in the woods for hours and hours and hours to buy this shoe. This expensive cloth that you're talking about, that's inherited from my father. So, you have to put things in perspective.
Yeah.
So, whenever you have, you're giving something to the kids, I'm not saying make it hard for them, but the idea is they need to earn it. If you give things to the kids just like that, they will never. So my daughter right now is on her 96th point. Each time she does something right, we talk about, there's a point system. When she gets 100 points, she's going to get her little toy car, and she's working on that. See, in the beginning, you got to create some motivation for them. Then they realize, because as a kid, they may not know what's the importance of prayers. Obviously teach them. But if you can relate it to something that is important to them, that car, that toy, and then explain it in their language, they understand that. And then afterwards, when they're 7, 8, 9, when they're supposed to be praying, that motivation would be intrinsic. Before it was based on getting that point. And also very, very important, not only reprimand them when they do something wrong, because we're very common and we do that all the time. Something goes wrong, we reprimand them. you have to reward them. So there was a child psychologist that I was talking to when I was just discussing, and then what she did was when she was training kids, and she was talking about her own kids, they would put little things on the fridge that would be folded pieces of paper, and when the kids did something right, they would open that and they'd get a little reward in that. It may be just 2 M&Ms, or it may be a point that they get, or it may be something. So you also need to have a reward system, and not only most of the parents only have a reprimand system. When they do something wrong, they hear about it. Same thing in businesses. When people do something wrong, they hear about it. When they do something right, you never walk in and say, you know what, you did a good job. So sometimes, I go to my daughter, that's very good, excellent, you did a good job. And that makes a huge difference in making trust.
Good point. So we learn a few things here, things that we do, about things that we don't. What do you think we shouldn't? Maybe we heard one shouldn't, like give them gifts, for example, if they don't earn it. But sometimes you may ask, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes Al-Wahhab gives you that, really, you counting it. وَهَبَ لَنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً. So sometimes things come as a gift. But mostly in the Quran, you have to earn them. As we said, Maryam, Allah tells her, وَهُزِّي إِلَيْكِ بِجِذْعِ النَّخْلَةِ. Shake the trunk of the tree. So you really have to earn things, work hard for them, and so on. But maybe among the things that you shouldn't do is, for example, your child is graduating, going to college. Are you going to give a luxury car or a working car? You see? You afford to do both. You can afford it. You can give your child a Lexus, or you can give your child a Toyota. It's up to you. But talking from the perspective that we presented, you don't want to overdo it. You want to have control. That's one of the things you should do. You shouldn't give them everything they want. Everything they want, then, there's nothing else for them to look forward to. So it's very important. In addition to that, it's very important to take them out of this environment that we have and go. Boy Scouting, Girl Scouting, camping. Go to a farm. Go someplace like the Prophet ﷺ used to do, Ghar Hira. Go as a family where you are away from technology. Maybe you get the safety things, and then the rest is deal with nature for a few days. Go to your grandparents, if they have a farm and they live in go and spend some time there. These tools are very, very good tools. When we get used to something, we get so much attached to it. Imagine you lose electricity. How is your life going to be if you live without electricity for a few days, like the people who are suffering and suffered in Oklahoma, and other people suffering all over the world? You see, sometimes we live in a ni'mah and we don't realize how much this ni'mah means to us until we lose it. So really, this is a very important tarbiyah tool that Allah used with all the prophets and all the good people. And I think we should remember to use it. Okay, the next item on my Quranic tools here is the active listening and the heart. And I take this from my readings in Surah Al-Anbiya. The verses that you have here is the opening of Surah Al-Anbiya. Allah said, فَقْتَرَبَ لِلنَّاسِ حِسَابُهُمْ وَهُمْ فِي غَفْلَةٍ مُعْرِضُونَ. The hisab has come, the hour has come, the day of judgment has come, and the people are in ghafla, heedless. They're turning away. Whenever the dhikr comes to them, مَا يَأْتِيهِم مِّن ذِكْرٍ مِّن رَبِّهِمْ مُحْدَثٍ إِلَّا اسْتَمَعُوهُ وَهُمْ يَلْعَبُونَ. When the dhikr comes to them, they listen to it while they are playing. لَاهِيَةً قُلُوبُهُم. Their heart is in a state of amusement. And then وَأَسَرُّوا النَّجْوَى الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا هَلْ هَذَا إِلَّا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ أَفَتَأْتُونَ السِّحْرَ وَأَنْتُمْ تُبْصِرُونَ. And they made a statement. I'm not going into the rest of the verse. Here, they didn't benefit. Why didn't they benefit from the Quranic perspective of this verse? Why didn't they benefit? Can somebody answer me? What can we conclude from this verse?
They're busy enjoying themselves and amusing themselves?
Yes. It's a very good point. Go on, follow up please. Because they are in ghafla and heedlessness, that's also another factor. But how would you relate it to listening? Yes. So when you are too much busy with this world, you're not going to benefit. What else can we conclude? Well, the same thing, but we put it in a different way. In terms of our children. إِلَّا اسْتَمَعُوهُ وَهُمْ يَلْعَبُونَ. They listen while they are playing. Does this ring a bell? Barira, what do you think? Barira is my student, so I always pick on her. She always comes up with good answers. Sarah, what does it mean? لَا اسْتَمَعُوهُ وَهُمْ يَلْعَبُونَ.
I would say maybe listening to music
Listening to music, for example,
while doing homework.
While doing homework, or I'm talking to you. Sometimes it happens, and they're playing a game.
They're not paying attention.
They're not paying attention. That's the key word. When you don't pay attention, while I'm teaching you, you're not paying attention. You're not going to learn. As simple as that. Unless you put your heart into it, you're not going to learn. Yes, Daddy, what you want? Well, they're playing the game. Okay? Yeah, okay. Playing the game. Their hearts are not there. It's not careful attention.
My grandmother said it goes from one ear comes from the other ear.
Exactly. That's a good analogy.
Yeah, it just goes here and goes.
What happens when you are in a car and you're listening to a car and thinking about other things? And it doesn't stay. You ask yourself, what did I was listening to today in the radio? Maybe you remember it, maybe you don't. So if you don't put your heart into it, the Quran said, لَاهِيَةً قُلُوبُهُمْ. Their heart is in a state of amusement. When the heart is not focused, is not given attention, you can't learn. It's not going to help. How many of our children, when you teach them the Quran or Islam or anything, they don't learn? Now you can see why they're not learning. Because there is one of two things. Either you have the heart, your heart into it, or you listen carefully. But if the child is not listening carefully, is not giving attention, and the heart is not there, no benefit is going to happen. I have seen I give you an example, a child. And Sunday school, I know that child can memorize half a page a day. But guess what? Forcing him, pushing him, doing this. He finished in 1 year, 3 pages. 1 year, 3 pages. He could have finished them in 2 weeks. Why? His heart is not there. And when he listens, he's thinking about other things, he's playing, he's doing. And it happens with many of the children. So unless, and only unless, you kind of be serious, assertive with your child, you really need to listen. We need to have a serious talk. When I did that with the same child, when I did that, almost 180 degrees. Other way. Achievements jumped. Understanding jumped. Picked up so fast. Sitting like that on the chair. Okay, I sit, I come, he's sitting like that. I said, no, it's not going to work that way. You're going to sit down and you give attention. You sit down like that in the chair He said, yes, sir. I want to hear that. He said, yes, sir. He said, I want you to say it to your daddy and your mom. And then we started talking. Then he picked up. He was smart. He learned. But if he's not there, looking at the watch, rubbing his eyes, doing no benefit.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Could it be that the teacher sometimes is not creating enough interest to the student or to the kids, and that's why they're getting like bored, not paying attention enough?
Definitely, it plays a role. If you can give me the same. Definitely, the teacher plays a role, and that's what we are about here. We're learning together, and we're learning from one another. Parenting, what it means. Then me, a parent, is a teacher. Then when I talk to my child, I want to make sure that my child is in a position to listen.
Well, sometimes a student says the same lesson seems easy with this teacher and hard with that teacher.
And in general, students or children don't want to do anything. They just want to enjoy sitting and doing nothing for hours. That's what they prefer. They can listen to a song because the song is not going to require them anything. Passive listening. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. So we really want to change that. When you read here, is that the last one? Yeah. If you look here, Allah said, إن في ذلك in Surah Qaf, Allah said, إن في ذلك لذكرى لمن كان له قلب أو ألقى السمع وهو شهيد. What does it mean? إن في ذلك. When I say inna in the Quran is translated as inna translated as indeed or certainly. Very good. So whenever I see inna with a shadda on it, it means certainly or indeed. I could say fi dhalika la dhikra without inna, and in Arabic will work fine. But when I put inna, it means indeed, certainly. Allah wants to emphasize something. So surely, certainly, inna fi dhalika. In this, what is this dhalika or that referring to? The surahs, the Quran. Very good, mashallah. So definitely in the Quran, the dhikra, a reminder for the one, liman kana lahu, for the one who has one of two things. Number one, qalb, was qalb, heart. And number two, or, aw, meaning or, alqa sam'a, through the hearing, wa huwa shaheed, while giving attention. So the Quran will have a benefit for anyone who has one of two things. Not this and this. It says this or this. Okay? If I said wa means and, but here it says aw. Aw means or. So this or this. You guaranteed Allah will help you. God. Okay? So it says qalb, or you listen carefully. Which is the same message that we have. They listen, but they playing. And they're not putting their hearts. That's very important, tool in learning. Yes.
I have a question regarding that teenagers.
Yes.
I know like whatever you are talking about sama, mostly will work with our little kids.
Yes.
But for teenagers, mostly they are lahiyatan qulubuhum. Like their heart already filled with a lot of stuff.
Yes.
How we can fix them? This is our main problem.
Definitely, it's very important for us to work together as a team. If I build trust with my children, I give them, I really respect you. I want you to listen. That serious mutual relationship with love, with care, with all the elements that we presented earlier would work together.
This is the one I was going also to ask you when you said trust. Like if you already noticed and proved to you that your son doing many mistakes, many big sin or so, and you cannot give him your trust anymore. That's it. Even you tried many times, give him a chance, second chance, third chance, he's still doing it the same thing, and he said sorry, I will not do it again, but he still go back and do it. How you can give him your trust?
Again, it's very important that I build a strategy. Of course, every case is different, but when we talk generally, there is what I call planned ignoring. That's a term that is used in educational psychology. Planned ignoring is when you ignore something intentionally. You're not dropping it, but you kind of let go for a purpose. Story Brother Omar mentioned to us, the teacher, did a planned ignoring here. Let things go without really bringing it to his attention. But it did have a big impact on Omar and his reaction after that to the teacher, you see. So why? Because I want to build a trust. And little by little, when my child sees that I let go, it might help build a good relationship. Yes. Yes.
I'm going to make a comment on what you said now, and also just talk about the laziness and dealing with kids when they're not motivated. If you look at, and again, my understanding of the Quran is minimal, but from what I realize, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about qalb, also in Surah Baqarah, we have given them hearts, but they don't think.
Yes.
So the heart is actually, it's about belief. Also there's a question on ilmul yaqeen. When you're looking at things, you look at something, you believe it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you say, I think there is a bottle of Coke in the fridge. I believe there is a bottle of Coke in the fridge. I know for sure there is a bottle of Coke in the fridge. There is a difference in those statements. Once you have that yaqeen, which is the iman, in such a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in front of you, whatever you're doing, He's watching you, your actions will be guided. Now, there are studies done, and we've done this in psychology, this is well documented. What makes people lack motivation? You see sometimes people who are good sports, figures. We have kids who are doing the right things. Then all of a sudden they fall off track. We have people who go to medical school. First year they fall off track. You see people who go for hifz class, other things, they fall off track. What happens is the number one ingredient that people lose when they lose motivation is sight of their goals. So what happens is, in some fashion or some way, they start getting confused with all these other things that are coming at them, music, friends, peer pressure, everything. If you go to that kid who's doing some kabair or doing bad things, and you try to convince him that it's wrong, or it's not going to work. He's not going to listen to you. He may trust you, it's not going to happen. First of all, hidayah comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All we can do is put effort, and then hopefully He will guide the child or even ourselves when we're doing something wrong. But the most important thing that we can do for that kid, or for the kid who's not participating in class, is to figure out what their goals are, and if they're aligned with what we think their goals should be, and then try to convince them or make them see the goals. So for example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about doing the right things, He talks about Jannah, He talks about the punishment, He talks about the qadr, He talks about why is the Quran doing that? Why doesn't the Quran tell you to go do good things and things will happen? No. You need to be clear. And when we start doing bad things, we lose sight of Jannah. We lose sight, like you mentioned, sight of those. We lose sight of what the heaven and hell is. Similarly, the kids, for the kid in the class, if we can find out what motivates them in terms of what their goals are, then you can go back. If you don't go to school and you don't study, you're not going to be able to make an earning. You won't be able to buy a house. You can motivate them that way. But you can also tell them about the sukoon. Listen, if you do this, you're going to have the sukoon. You'll sleep better. You will be a better person. People will come up to you and ask you for suggestions as opposed to you going to people with your... And maybe one of those things will motivate them. And again, that goes back to psychological contract. You need to know your kid. What's the motivating factor for them? Because once you start motivating them to do the right thing in itself will be motivating because they'll get sukoon from it. But in the beginning, for them to start doing it, you need to find out what ticks them and then play them in that direction.
Very good. Jazakallah khair. Good point. What? Yes.
Could not be said better than the way you did. Just one thing that I need to add, that sometimes we rush our kids too much. Like a 5 years old cannot behave like 10 years old, 10 years old cannot behave like 20 years old. And we were all kids and we did sometimes bad things or crazy things. And we tend to forget, we think that we were wise since we were born. It's not the case. So what you're saying is exactly 100% true, with enough time for the kids to reach to the point where they can start reacting the way we expect them to do.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair. Very good. Very good.
I'll make one more comment. There's actually a lot of studies done now. We know about adolescence. Before, people used to think adolescence is actually just a phenomenon where you have these hormones that go up in people. There is a significant amount of brain changes that happen. And actually they go on throughout our life. Even as adults, we're learning things and we're integrating. But if you take your kids, and it's beautiful what the Prophet says. If you read science fiction and medicine, you will go back and say, you know what, how did the Prophet know all this so much time before? It's just unbelievable. So when you look at the kids, when the Prophet says, how to train them as a child, remember, when they hit that teenage, they're going to go out of control. Not only because of the hormonal changes, but why we know for a fact that there is a significant amount of mental changes, the synapses that happen. It becomes very difficult for them at that time to stay focused, to listen to you, to do everything, like you said, to be wise. But remember, and those of, I don't have teenagers, but those of you guys who have seen teenagers go through and adults, you will notice your daughter, your son, they will revolt, they will do things that you don't like, they will give you a hard time, but when they go through that period, be assured they will come back to exactly the same kid they were before adolescence started.
No.
And they will be phenomenally better, more mature, and more intelligent in all those things that they had. So if you can set the tone before adolescence hits, and then be patient and keep guiding them, and do the planned ignorance,
Very good. Jazakallah khair. I think that illustrates my point. And alhamdulillah, you're touching a lot on what I'm going to present to you next week. Just some of the approaches, I'll come to you. Some of the approaches that we have, sometimes we set the standard here. Oh, my child, you got to come to my standard. Okay? You got to come here. You got to go down to the level of the child. Understand the child from a child's perspective, and take the child up. Should you stand high and say, come to me, come to my level, or should you go down to their level? Which one? Which one Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did?
Go down.
Down to their level. You see? That's a very important approach. And that's what Brother Umar was talking about. And that's what you alluded to a little bit. And that's, inshallah, we'll study it in some details. Approaches to raising the children. Very important to listen to the child's perspective. Very important to see what priorities. There is, when I said plan ignoring, lots of things that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ ignored early in the life of the companions. Lots of things. They were drinking, they were gambling, they were doing this. But there was something that would not be ignored. And that was the Iman. That was the strength of the Iman. That's what we're going to study together and the rest of this workshop, and see the steps and the phases in the development of the tarbiyah. So when I deal with my teenager, what should I ignore? What should I make sure that is there? That's part of my understanding as a parent, and that's part of the workshop that I want to have. What is it that I can ignore? What is it that I should not ignore? From experience, when we ignored things with our children in Kansas City and focused on certain things, mashallah, all of them passed the stage of the teenager age and the teenage age, and then they came in, mashallah, beautiful. Recovered from it, came back. But the 11 years or the 12 years of work like Yusuf a.s. had paid off at the end. And that's what we want to do. And let me share with you a few things after I listen to Dr. Sorry. Yeah.
I can't add much because you guys are really doing a marvelous job, but I just want to share something.
Sure.
Can't resist to say, not to say it. Well, you said something about ilm al-yaqeen. Well, it's very clear in the Quran. Kalla sawfa ta'lamuna, summa kalla sawfa ta'lamun, kalla law ta'lamuna. There are 3 times kalla, kalla, kalla.
Yes.
So, I recently started learning Arabic, so there's a lot to learn from these 3 words. Kalla, kalla, kalla.
Yes, Jazakallah khair. Inshallah, we'll come to some of these things. Jazakallah khair. So let me share with you a few more things. We build some background together and we go from there. So we said it's very important to have the heart or to listen carefully or to have both. And that's why you read in the Quran, وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. When the Quran is read, you listen. You don't do something else and play. And if you want to benefit from the words of Allah, you got to give attention, or you put your heart into it, or you do both of them. That is very important for us. Now, how do we plan for tarbiyah? That's another major phase